the spacemen sail the cosmic bay. From Jupiter to Saturn we'll deliver our freight on our starship, sailing through the interplanetary strait. With a hardy crew and a cargo of dreams, through the nebula's mist we'll forge our own schemes. In the vastness of space where no man has been, we'll navigate, chart the unexplored galactic highway. Heave ho, mateys, upon the starry sea. We're the spacemen sailing through infinity. With our voices loud and our spirits free, we'll voyage across the celestial sea. Voyage across the celestial sea.
In the abyss of the cosmos we set sail. Through crimson skies our ship prevails. Across the stars a celestial flight, metal warriors bound by might. Ooh, yeah. In this realm of shadows darkness unfurls, a symphony of chaos, where planets whirl and nebula of fury untamed, sailing through the void where nothing's the same. We ride through the cosmos, a metal storm, defying gravity. Our spirits transform through supernovas and celestial clouds. Our stellar voyage forever in the skies.
Digging deep in the Martian soil, searching for that precious ore. With pickaxes and heavy hearts, we're the miners of the cosmic shore. On this barren land, we march as one, unearthing treasures under the sun. In the cratered plains where no one dreamt, we're the pioneers on this frontier we're sent. Oh, we mine on the red planet soil, drilling down, down, down for the treasures we toil. With grit and determination, we push ahead for Mars' hidden riches. We're truly bred. We're truly bred.
Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to the stream. Apparently my camera doesn't like staying on task. Sure, that works. Man, I don't touch it in between days. It moves all over the place. Give me a second. Alright, I think that's better. Anyways, now that the technical difficulties are mostly sorted out, I hope everyone's doing well today. Good morning, Samantha, John, Menetheria, Jean, D, Dark Mirror, Diggs, by the way, 1, Donald, Anthony. Good morning. Good morning. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think my next iteration of my... And there it is again. Just keeps moving. Problem is, it's a teleprompter. So changing the angle of the camera means that I'm changing the angle of the screen, which makes it more difficult to read. But yes, next iteration of this is definitely going to be bolted down. But I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. And this early morning, late afternoon, / late evening / afternoon, which is basically all the time. Okay. Now, I've got gunk shining off my glasses. It's always good. Great! Fair enough. Fair enough. Any day you wake up, it's way better than a day that you don't. I haven't moved, but the camera is moving. It's very annoying. Morning, Lord Volpex. I hope you are doing well today. OBS, same to you. Turn. Oh, you can't turn. That explains a thing or two. This is just getting ridiculous. Extreme close-up. Okay. Nope, that's the wrong way. Yes, super zoom. Okay. We are centered. Good morning, Nirvana. I hope you're doing well. Okay, so that's the camera centered. Now I need to put the teleprompter screen back on. Technical difficulties. Always technical difficulties. It wouldn't be a stream if it weren't for technical difficulties. I even had the Quantum Monster, just to help kick me in the pants and get working today. I'm sorry to hear that, OBS. Hopefully, I can help keep your mind at ease for a little while. Now let's skew the other way. Right. What am I checking? Making sure everything is running as should be. The monster is attacking back. Okay. Ooh, new goal started. Right. We also have a nice fresh cut today. Sides are getting a bit long. Okay. I think we've fiddled enough. We can maybe perhaps do some work. So we knocked it out the park yesterday. We did quite a bit. So that enables us to do some re-TFOS today, which is the first for the streams. Just double checking this one. 3, 2. That's what I have. Awesome. So, yes, re-TFOS. As in, going back to the olden days, the time before time. And redoing old stories in the latest, greatest format. So we're going to go into work mode, which is this one. I'm going to move you over here, and here we go. Re-TFOS. A regal, legal eagle story, written a whopping 10 years ago. A decade. That's definitely not what I wanted. What did I want? I just wanted that. Yeah, this new format. Harumph. Harumph indeed. Part 1. Uno. And then part deuce. Move that over there. Stuff and things and screens and everything. All right. Yes, the infamous spoon melting coffee. That is definitely a way to start the morning. With an exorcism. Alrighty. Now, for those that are new here, I make audiobooks. I narrate stuff on YouTube. This is the process in which I narrate the stuff on YouTube. I go through the stories and I assign voices to the various characters, and then after that I shall do the thing. Make the voices. Okay. So today we've got 3 stories of a longer variety, which a lot of the retifos would be. Nope, it's not 3, it was 10. And that's 2. Tickety-tack, tickety-tack. M2. M3. Nope, M10. If you are confused about the keywords, which I often am, there's a whole bunch of stuff underneath here. Right there. Which kind of explains the keywords. In a very vague way. Assassin 221. I don't know. I look at how the character's talking, but I tend to go with themes rather than characters. So older characters or veterans, experienced characters get an older voice, whereas younger characters will get a more naive voice. I tend to give aliens more annoying voices, if they're baddies. And then senior officers get a more gruff voice. Stuff like that. But it's basically just picking, testing. Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Is anybody out there? Hello? My VPN just decided to disconnect. It's fantastic. Definitely a work morning. Are we back? Test. Hello? Is there anybody out there? Nope. Okay. Good afternoon. Morning. Kyle, hope you're doing well. My local time is 10 o'clock in the morning. So it is a bit weird timing-wise. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, bot, for telling me that I am now live. It's very much appreciated for informing me that I am currently live. Good job, bot. Good job. Keep at it. Yeah, basically off feel. I mean, most people don't describe the voices that they're using, so it's normally up to free reign. The most descriptive the most authors get is whether it's male or female. Probably Lord Volpex, probably. Or even tomorrow. It'll let you know tomorrow that I started going live today. You know, just have to make super extra sure. Hello, dog. What are you looking for? The cat. It's no cat, yeah. Echo, echo, echo. Oh. Alrighty. Shouldn't be an echo. Well, not much of an echo. M10. M2. M10. M2. M10, M2, M10, M2, M10. I'm noticing a very distinct pattern here. Yes, it is definitely an important member. The cat was here earlier, but cat. The dog just came marching in here looking for his friend. And only found me and looked at me with contempt. Can't say I blame him. Good morning, Postmatic. I hope you're doing well today. Fair enough, Gene. That sounds about right. I'm doing well, thank you, Postmatic. As well as can be. And that is better than most. Well, it's the best you can be, really. Me too. M10? M2, M10, M2. Okay. The story is roughly 20 minutes. Everything is running, I think. Yes. So this post is so old that it was actually originally on 4chan, on the X board. I think. Or it was one of the first posts on the HFY. The subreddit. Good morning, Kandari. Hope you're doing well. That is fair enough, Samantha. I can identify with that. Okay, what are we doing? We're opening up the teleprinter. We are stifling a sneeze. And pasting. Right. Fair enough, Kandari. Fair enough. Okay. You can go over here. And to open that up. Alrighty. Straighten everything. Come on. Jacket unstuck. Alright. Time for some work. Okay, recording. Glasses off. Everything's working. Chat, I will see you on the flip side. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this re-TFOS. As in, we were doing old TFOS to the modern standard. Now, this particular story is called Those Who Remember, written by Regal. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this re-TFOS episode, Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of retelling of the old Tales from Outer Space, or re-TFOS. If you have never seen one of these before, I take old stories and do them again, back to the standard that we use now. Anyways, if you could if you could click the like button and the subscribe button and, I have a huge favor. If you could click the like and subscribe button, it would mean a lot to me. Anyways, on to the story. Those Who Remember by Regal Legal Eagle. He looked out through the diner window, the rain beating down against it, as the storm beyond had whipped the bay into a teeming mass of waves with white crests. Slowly, he rubbed a hand along his jaw. His beard had once been a rich auburn, now simply white. Then he looked back at the fresh-faced young man who had asked him the question. He was wearing one of those new fancy suits, some sort of synthetic fibers, the latest range. Those young eyes didn't know the kind of hardship and pain he'd been through. Did they know anything but peace and prosperity? It seems impossible that within his life there was a generation that didn't know war and strife. "How far back would you like me to go?" he finally asked the young man. "As far back as you are willing. As far back as you're willing to." He slid a hollow recorder across the table to make sure the conversation was captured in full detail. The old man wondered if it meant the storm outside was going to be on it as well. Slowly, he sighed out and took a sip of the dark black coffee he had ordered. "We came from a place once known as the Midwest, back on Earth, where the area known locally as America. You probably. We came from a place once known as the Midwest, back on Earth, the area known locally as America. You probably know more about that place than I did if you paid attention in history. I never went to a real school or nothing. My mother's mother taught me reading and writing, and basic numbers. My dad taught me how to maintain and clean my gun, how to shoot and fight. We did plenty of that. After the last round of wars, after our ancestors left, things were bad. We had scavenged some old military trucks, our clan, so we'd drive them around, followed the game, living off the land and the fruits and veggies that we could scrounge up. He thought back on his childhood, back on Earth, scratching the side of his nose idly while in thought. There were about 500 of us in the clan. My dad was important, chief mechanic, kept everything running. That was big. If you couldn't keep ahead of the storms, you weren't going to survive. Well, storms and raiders. Raiders? Oh yeah. For those clans like mine, that was content to survive and scrounge their there were others who wanted more. Or perhaps they wanted what we wanted, but just thought it was easier to take what we had. We'd get attacked at least once a week. I was in my first firefight at 14. By 16, I was a scout. Had myself an old dune buggy I fixed up myself. He smiled back at the thought. He smiled as he thought back on his buggy. It was little more than an engine, 4 wheels, and a seat strapped to a frame. But when he was a kid, it was the greatest thing in the world. At least, that world. My father was killed in a raid when I was 18. I had the gift for machinery like him, but they needed me to fight more than fix for a while. We found the beacon when I was 19. It was an old military base we were scavenging when I found it. I had no idea what the Slavic Federation was, and I couldn't speak Russian, but I could tell that it wasn't old tech. It was something new, something important. I convinced the others to change what we'd been doing, to settle in the base and protect it until I could figure it out. Was it difficult to convince everyone? No. They saw what I meant when I pointed it out. Someone had sent something shiny and new back to Earth. We knew the old legends. We were ready for some hope. So we set up shop. The raids became more regular, but we now had a solid spot to defend. Turned out I didn't need to learn Russian. We'd been there about a month when the transmission came through. 6 or 7 different languages. English was one of them. Told us to sit tight and how to respond. Were you nervous? Someone from another planet tries to talk to me. Heck yes, I was nervous. But I followed the instructions, and thankfully they were idiot-proof. I got in touch with the program, answered what I could, and they told us our clan would be the first. Answered what I could, and they told us our clan would be first. I didn't know what for, but I was too nervous to ask. So we got everything we had ready for travel. Just like ordered, we patched up our pressure suits and stood around the beacon. 4 hours, just standing there. I started to worry someone was messing with us. The raiders didn't attack, no, thankfully. Then we were somewhere else. You ever used one of those gates? No, I haven't. It's interesting. It's like somehow you know you went somewhere, and you feel like you got squished and rebuilt. But all that in an instant. Anyway, there we were, suddenly somewhere else. It was gorgeous, too. Like the old pictures my mother's mother would show me. The national parks, they used to call them. It was all green and alive and just gorgeous. I figured no one would be trying to kill me here. Of course, I was wrong. They didn't tell you about the war. Well, from what I understand, when they activated the beacon, the war hadn't started. I mean, it feels like an instant, but it was actually like a week. I'm not a scientist, so I can't be sure. Either way, I finally noticed the soldiers waving us forward. I had an old military rifle at the time. Among the clans, it was highly prized. Very advanced compared to the old beat-up milsurp. Very advanced compared to the old beat-up milsurp the others had. The what? Sorry, old term, it remains from the last war. Just common rifles they pumped out in the millions to arm as many people as possible. Mine was a special forces weapon, handed down from my father's mother. I was also wearing a combat harness pressure suit instead of a civilian models the others had. So, they have to understand as a 19-year-old at the time, I felt like a real elite soldier. He chuckled and shook his head, laughing for a moment. What is it? Oh, just how wrong I was. You know, everything when you're a teen. You know everything when you're a teen. Well, the guys were waving us forward, shouting in Russian. They had real armor, real guns. Right away, I could tell that they could kill us all without much effort. I'm not sure that unloading a whole clip into one of them would have even fazed him. So, there we were, standing in a paradise, wondering why the soldiers were trying to get us out of the platform. Wondering why the soldiers were trying to get us to the platform. Wondering why the soldiers were trying to get us to get off the platform. Then the African Union attacked. Boom! Explosions all around us. Everyone was screaming, finally moving, running the way the soldiers were pointing. We heard the trees snapping and the animals we'd never seen flying off in the sky. Surprise. And animals we'd never seen flying off into the sky in surprise. These sleek black killer robots all around us. The LEV tanks were backing up, holding them back. Battlesuits sprawling with CNDRs. It was chaos. Here we were, a bunch of stupid hicks in the middle of a fight between gods. Were you scared? Of course I was. This wasn't a raider attack. My gun, my prized possession. I saw some of the troops' apostles. I shot at them, and my bullets just scratched their paint. The centurions waved me off. They weren't exactly winning the battle. So we kept running. Those in trucks, driving around in craters and trying not to get shot up too much. Finally, we made it to a mag rail station. A LEV destroyer was parked in front of it. Now, obviously, I've never seen anything like the battlesuits and LEV tanks, but something about that guy, just the sheer size and power as it sat there, spitting out artillery fire. It was amazing. More than being transported across the galaxy. Well, like I said, there wasn't much of an experience. It just sort of happened, and I didn't understand it. But that LEV destroyer, it was an awe-inspiring. It was awe-inspiring. I stood there as the others pushed around me. I was just standing there like a slack-jawed local watching this glorious, magnificent, incredible piece of engineering blow up robots. Piece of engineering. Blow those robots up. But finally, one of the soldiers set his hand on my shoulder, pointing to the rest of the clan that was leaving me behind, and said something else in Russian, which I still didn't know. That would have been your wife. Yes, of course, I didn't know it then. In the heavy armor, she just looked like another soldier. What did she say to you? She changes her answer depending on who's around. But I think the truth is she told me to stop standing there like a target and get my butt moving. The old man grinned as he thought back at that. So I did. I caught up with everyone else as the other soldiers were waving us into the mag train. There were some old ruins with the monorails in the caverns. There were some old ruins with the monorails in the craters of some big cities, but I never dreamed of seeing something up and running. It was all a lot to take in. But the battle kept us from slowing down. Did you lose anyone? No. The soldiers made sure that we all got through okay. I think they felt responsible since they called us from Earth into a war without warning us. We sat on the train, watching the land slip past us. All that lush green land, like I said before, it was a paradise to us. No dust storms, no derelict dead cities. Lush green paradise. We saw the small towns and cities we passed back, but it looked like Earth. Just way nicer. How did you know it wasn't just the sky? I couldn't put my finger on it, but it wasn't quite right. And then, of course, when we passed through those massive chitin paddocks as we approached Krabrost. Those were not Earth critters. No way, no how. What was your impression of the capital? Well, we didn't stop that first day. They were trying to get us the hell away from the fighting. We just saw it from the mag rail as we went past. We could see it in the distance. Massive buildings towering high into the sky. It was even more beautiful than the pictures I'd seen of our old cities before everything went to hell. I now know that they planned on having a big ceremony at the gate and an event explaining all of this to us. But the war had started rather suddenly, so they were scrambling to get us to safety. Did you know things weren't going well? I could guess. I mean, everyone was mostly stunned and shocked, still at how fast the land was moving beneath us. But I noticed all the other trains heading the way we'd come. LEV tanks, rows of battlesuits, the Predators flying by. Our train was diverted near the city for LEV destroyers to move past. It took up both tracks. The train kept going on into the night. We huddled up, ate our rations, and wondered what was going on. They'd say things like PA, but none of us knew Russian, and he didn't know English. So you'd say it's poorly planned. So you'd say it was poorly planned, poorly executed. Like I said, I learned about all their plans afterwards, which sounded good. They just didn't plan on a war, so they couldn't do what they'd planned. I mean, considering the war and all of that, they did very well. They did very well keeping us alive. It took us 2 days to get to Dirt, but we had traveled half a continent in that time. Ah yes, Dirt. That was your idea for a name. Hell yes, it was. After all the gorgeous forests and lush paradise we traveled through, they dropped us off in some barren dirt here in this bay. They had some prefab buildings set up, very sloppy, obviously rushed. That's when I met Grigory, the old ambassador to Ark before the war. He spoke English and explained more of what was going on. I'll be honest, until he told us those robots were an African Union and they'd been human at some point, I never would have guessed. There were some officials, obviously unsure of how to proceed. What happened? He told us the land was ours. They were going to be bringing in more people from Earth, but since we were the first, we'd get to name the first city. I asked if they were going to be bringing in other Americans only, or anyone. He told me everyone they could find on Earth was welcome to join us. So I said that we should call it Dirt. They were a little confused and asked if I meant Earth. I said no. I didn't want to name it something that only made sense to Americans, and I figured everyone was willing to fight for their own patch of dirt. So we all agreed to call it Dirt. The officials didn't like it, but Grigori just laughed. He approved? Sure did. What happened next? We started building up Dirt. He waved a hand out through the window. The city is now quite different than it was. Everyone built their own little section. I'm sure you're aware my family owns the docks. How did that come about? We'd never seen the ocean before, let alone gone swimming. We'd never seen the ocean before, let alone go swimming, and we all discovered we loved it. We had more than our fair share of dust, so we made sure to settle along the waterfront. Everyone found their own little spot. Africans, Europeans, Asians, all the leftovers who didn't have ancestors lucky enough to leave. They found them where they could and brought them here. Few of us spoke the same language, but we got along. We had a real home now. We had our own dirt. But it wasn't that easy, was it? No. That was first year. No. That first year before the next wave of settlers could be found. The first year before the next wave of settlers could be found, we were attacked by Ark. The front had been secured along the original borders with the African Union, but the coast was exposed. I couldn't believe it. Somehow it didn't really hit me that Ark was Americans. When the soldiers showed up and they were speaking English, their alien physiology twisted and inhuman, they spoke English. It was hard to accept at first. What happened? They attacked the city. People died, buildings were destroyed, but we survived. We'd been attacked before we knew what to do. The army showed up before they could do much more than mess up the town. After that, I demanded to join the military and help. They wouldn't let you. I couldn't believe it. But they first told me it was their responsibility to fight for us. We struggled our whole lives. Now they wanted us to live in peace while they struggled for us. I couldn't believe their desire for sacrifice on a national level. Their desire, hell, our desire. I mean, at this point, it's obviously more than just the Slavic Federation. It's obviously more than just a Slavic Federation. We still had allies with the Franco-Iberians and the Brazilians. How long did it take to be admitted? I had to learn Russian, and then I built a small LEV forklift on my own, without proper tools. That convinced them to let me become an LEV mechanic. I just kept at it, repairing tanks until I met my wife. Her crew was dead. We were fighting hard against the Union again. This must have been 5 years into the war. Me and the other mechanics fixed it up, jumped in, and went to war. Didn't stop for the next 20 years. So, you were there for all of it? Sure was. Got married and had some kids while it was all going on, but yeah, I was there through every major land campaign. I don't want to talk about that too much, if you don't mind. Please, only what you're comfortable with. The old man looked out the window. The rain had let up, and the storm was dying down. He could see the boats taking advantage of the lull to start hauling in their catch. Mostly, it was salmon and tuna. The fisheries had taken hold, and now the planet was teeming with familiar life. The young man spoke up. "What made you join and stay through the whole war?" "How can I not? I told you I knew almost nothing about any of this world when I found that beacon. Yet they welcomed us with open arms. They took settlers from every corner of Earth they could. It didn't matter to them. They wanted to give us a new home. Their soldiers died keeping us alive, even though we couldn't help the war effort in any meaningful way at the start. They wouldn't allow us to join at first. They were fighting and dying to give us a new home." He shook his head slowly. Then, as he looked at his coffee, "I didn't hate the robots or the harmies. They'd come to this world. They'd come to this new world and lost their way. They let it change them into becoming more alien or more machine until they forgot what being human actually meant. All the Slavic Federation wanted to do was give us a chance to share in the prosperity and tranquility they'd found in this new world. They hadn't understood that the machines and aliens found this threatening. They'd already shed their humanity, while those of us who remained pure fought tooth and nail to make this planet a new home for those who'd been left behind. You think they weren't human anymore? They were aliens and machines by the time I got here. Even if some part of them knew what they used to be, they left it behind. But the others, the Slavic Federation, the Brazilla, the Franco-Iberia, they never forgot what they left behind. It was us. And when they had the chance to bring us to our new home, they took it. And someday, I hope to go back and turn Earth back into what we know. And turn Earth back into what we know it can be. That's our burden, but we take it willingly. That's what keeps us pure. And this is when you want to pioneer the expedition back to Earth. And this is when you want to pioneer the expedition back to Earth. There hasn't been any more contact in 20 years, you know, and you're quite advanced in your age at this point. I'm old, kid. You can come out and say it. But why this continuous struggle? Why not just let the next generation take up the task? The old man smiled and ran a hand over his weathered and scarred face. There's an old quote I remember from being a kid. Some old god had made this strong guy carry the world on his shoulders. When the man begged the god, it wasn't to end his burden. He begged for broader shoulders so that he may carry it more easily. Not everyone remembers. Not everyone will carry the burden. But those that do it because we must, not because we are asked. End of story. Alrighty. Let's take some hydration. Catch up with Chitty Chat Chat. Good luck with your model, Lord Vulpix. Good afternoon, Nigel. Hope you're doing well. And Marcus, same to you. Or Postmatic. The reason why I call you Marcus is because your surname is cut off on the chat. I agree, Nigel. That's why I want to redo at least the first 700 stories. Because then we can add scrolling text and we can add visuals. Private Cyan 87, good afternoon. Thank you for joining the stream. And thank you for the kind words. I'm glad you're enjoying the content. Morning, James. Hope you're doing well. I'm pretty sure all of Douglas Adams' stuff still is under copyright, so I wouldn't be able to do it. All right, now I'm caught up. Yeah, like younger voices are a bit more difficult because you have to speak in a bit of a higher pitch. So I didn't want to make the younger guy Snively. So it makes it a bit more challenging. I tend to default going deeper rather than higher, which is just habit more than anything else. A habit I developed for a very specific reason and then spent a lot of money to get rid of. So I do need to use the whole range. I paid for it, might as well use it all. Oh no, this is re-T-Foss. Re-7. I try to do as much as possible, but there is a running theme of the channel. When I get more than 2 weeks ahead, I get sick or go to surgery. So, there is that. Good morning, Cabbage Plains. I hope you're doing well. So, ideally, I would want a month. But that's never actually happened. So, that is what it is. Hopefully, with the more consistent voice, I can get a week, 2 weeks, or even a month ahead. Definitely going to need several weeks ahead when I moved to Portugal. Yeah, so I mean, younger people speak faster as a general thing, and older people speak slower. And then also pitch. So younger men speak higher pitch. Actually, also women as well speak a bit higher pitch. This is the excitability of it. But the American voice is a deep voice anyway. Good morning, John Wenzel. I hope you're doing well. All right, that was Uno's story. Aches and pains, just to make life that much more exciting. Fair enough, James. Fair enough. Okay, sure. Move on to the next story. So we're going to be doing a lot of Regal Legal Eagle because it was one of the first authors that said yes. So a lot of the original stories I did were his. Oh, I've got a stitch. I don't know why I've got a stitch. I'm not even doing anything interesting to get a stitch. Alrighty, we'll do some clickety clinks. Open a new screen, close the old screen, open up writer, and paste. Well, yes. I don't know why it's called a stitch, but it is what it is. Sharp pain in my side for no apparent reason. Yeah, I mean, Regal, I think one of my favorite stories of his is the bare knuckle boxing lawyers. That made me laugh. He could write some funny stuff. And he writes serious stuff well as well. Okie dokie. There's gonna be... No, that is wrong. I just copied half a story from one story, and then the second half from a different story. Would have confused the hell out of me. Okie dokie. Move you over here. Put my ears in properly. Stay hydrated. And away we go. Ah, sorry, I missed that. Good morning, Captain. Hope you're doing well. Let's see. I did miss some stuff. Cabbage. I am, as stated in chat, I'm South African. My dad is English. My mom is Scottish. I'm first generation South African. So that's the weird voice you hear. It is kind of a mutt accent from all over the place. Good morning, sir. I hope you're doing well. Fair enough, sir. As long as you're not late for work or anything. It's always the worst. Ah, fair enough, sir. Fair enough. So in South Africa, accents vary wildly. We have 11 official languages, so it means there's a lot of, we would say cross-contamination is the wrong word, but cross-pollination, probably a better word, in accents. So I'm very much on the British side of South African accent. But there are people with very thick accents, like Vickers van der Merwe from District 9. That is a real accent. You don't see it too often these days, but it does. Cross-cultural, yes. Cross-cultural pollination. So, I mean, that is the Afrikaans English accent. Depending on how thick it is. Well, so it's irrelevant. It's just Afrikaans English accent. Vickers is particularly thick in that movie. He plays it up to like 14. Most Afrikaans people don't sound like that. Awesome. I mean, you come across, what's it, French is a pretty predominant language in Central Africa, as well as Portuguese. Well, I mean, it's not like we all have to speak 11 languages. Most people speak English. To some degree. So, I mean, if you're just tolerant with bad English, you can understand most people. So, I mean, Vickers was actually, he's making it, it's a satire of the Afrikaans accent, which is common for South Africans to do to each other, to make fun of each other and rip each other and all of that stuff. So the fact that he did it so heavy was also very interesting. Not interesting, funny. Funny to me. Fucking prawns. Good morning, Brian Wells. I hope you're doing well today. Yes. Accents of other countries can be a bit, but I only know 2 languages. Well, kinda. I know English and a little bit of Afrikaans. I was very stubborn when it comes to languages or language in school, so they tried to beat Afrikaans into me, and it didn't stick. But when I was in school, English and Afrikaans was compulsory. I'm not entirely sure. I don't think it is anymore. I think English is compulsory only. Actually, I think we'll do this as M10. I think the mix is much better. I think you're stuck, Lord Volpex. Something weird's happening there. You've asked the same question 3 times. Fair enough, Postmatic. That's pretty impressive. Yes. Afrikaans is with a K, but yes. Because you just wrote Africans, which is funny in a different way. Afrikaans, which is Dutch, and a little bit of German. The Namibian Afrikaans is more German than Dutch, but it is quite heavily Dutch. Dutch from 200 years ago, and then 200 years of cultural drift. Fair enough, Samantha. I'm pretty close to that. So, in Africa, specifically South Africa, meeting polyglots, which is people who speak several languages, is actually pretty common. So a lot of people speak 5 or 6 languages. I'm just stubborn and don't like languages. The only languages I ever learned were programming languages and English. That's about it. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to learn Portuguese at some point. Unless I just do my cultural heritage of British, go to a foreign country and just refuse to speak the local language. but stitch is definitely stitching. Oh, yes, yes. Okay, this has been years, so I've probably forgotten it. Visual Basic for applications, C++, Java, SQL. That's 5. A little bit of C#, some HTML thrown in, PHP, you know, all the classics. Yeah, I know. But it's also easier once you're living in the culture. Gaelic is hard. Unfortunate. Okay, let's try that again. Yeah, I mean, different accents are kind of like learning new languages, but not. It's like learning half a language. Pascal as well. I learned Turbo Pascal in school. But an if statement is just an if statement, regardless of the language. So once you've got the logic of a programming language down, you can pretty much learn any language. Good afternoon, Rolando. Oh, still morning. How are you doing? Yeah, I used to do that as well, John. Alrighty, that is that done. I'm going to step away for a couple minutes, and I'll be right back. I shall put on some songs and change the screen.
Saturn will deliver our freight on our starship, sailing through the interplanetary strait. With a hardy crew and a cargo of dreams, through the nebula's mist we'll forge our own schemes. In the vastness of space where no man has been, we'll navigate, chart the unexplored galactic highway. Give all mates upon the starry sea. We're the spacemen sailing through infinity. With our voices loud and our spirits free, we'll voyage across the celestial sea. Through crimson skies our ship prevails. Across the stars a celestial flight, metal warriors bound by might. In this realm of shadows darkness unfurls, a symphony of chaos, where planets swirl and nebula of fury untamed.
And back.
Digging deep in the Martian soil, searching for that precious ore. With pickaxes and heavy hearts, we're the miners of the cosmic shore. On this barren land, we march as one, unearthing treasures under the sun. In the cratered plains where no one dreamt, we're the pioneers on this frontier we're sent.
All right. A little bit of hydration. Thank you, Anthony. Much appreciated. We can head into work mode number 2. Okay. Work mode. Shh. And good morning, Thomas. I hope you're doing well. Accents are cool, and it adds a bit of character to everyone. Anyways, we're going to go start recording. Chat, I'm going to ignore you for the next 28.5 minutes. And I'll see you on the other side. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this retelling of A Tales from Outer Space, where we take the original T-Foss and give him a modern twist. So, onto the story. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Re-T-Foss, where we take old T-Foss and give him a modern twist, as we push them up to the modern standards. Anyway, this particular story is called The Best We Have to Offer. This particular story is called The Best We Have to Offer, written by Regal Legal Eagle. When humans finally started to expand beyond their systems, they found that they weren't alone in the galaxy. In fact, their neck of the woods, so to speak, held many other species, all trying to expand at the same time. Through some cosmic twist, most species were at about the same technological level, and everyone started to do what they could to secure their strength. Unfortunately for humanity, their biggest neighbor was a race of war-loving half-machine bugs who wanted the system humanity had just started to colonize. The war raged for 10 years, claiming millions of lives, but in the end, humanity had won, reducing the machine bugs' home to a cracked open dead husk while claiming their system. It had been a hard-won victory, however. The human population had been weakened, and after 10 years of conflict, the economy was struggling. There was no grand federation of peaceful planets to turn to, but a recent consortium of power and wealthy species had formed. The Triumvirate was hosting a massive exhibition for all accompanying species. The Triumvirate was hosting a massive expedition. The Triumvirate was hosting a massive expedition for all competing species to determine who they should invest their vast trade wealth into. With the tech a little behind the Triumvirate and their resources plentiful but common, humanity had to determine what set them apart. Physically, every species had some skill or advantage. Humanity was more adaptable and tenacious than any of their neighbors, but it was hard to sell tenacity or adaptability. What they needed was to present something that set them apart and made them unique in the galaxy. It was also clear their neighbors wanted to stop them from earning the trade contract. Humanity needed to find the best we have to offer. Agent Wakefield, please respond. Proceed, station. The cartel is aware of your location. You need to move. I'm securing the special materials required for our presentation. Well, secure them and move! Agent Wakefield cursed as she quickly began to stuff the packages into a secure metal box she had been provided. The genetic lock should make sure only she could open it, but their enemies would just destroy it rather than open it. Their last shipment of supplies, waiting at the Triumvirate Conference, had been sabotaged, and they had to send for replacements through courier. Only the Triumvirate had ships fast enough to make it to Earth and back in time, and humanity had paid handsomely for the service. She was in a secure room at the courier office at the massive space station that had been constructed just for this trade show. It was a sprawling mass orbiting the Triumvirate's recently colonized Eden World Chrysalian. All three species had colonized it to showcase their solidarity, but this trade station was the real draw. Over 15 square miles of rooms, hallways, meeting rooms, docking bays, and of course, the main trade conference center. The courier office was in the far arm, away from the trade conference at the edge of the station. She had quite a ways to go to make it back in time. Tucking the box into a secret pocket, she stepped out of the secure room and was suddenly face to face with two energy pistols. They were being held by a pair of lanky green deckish thugs. They were humanoids with subpar intelligence that were employed by the cartel. "Give it up, you men!" The other species in the office screamed at the sight of the weapons and ran out of the office, leaving her alone with the two thugs. "Oh dearie me, is this a robbery? Oh me, oh my! But why do you want pictures of my grandchildren? I'm only a poor old grandmother." The thugs frowned at that and examined the human in front of him. It was a female that was particularly hunched over, with pure white hair and a floral dress that covered everything but her hands and her face. She had a worried face that looked wrinkled and aged. Their implants were informing them that she was likely a human grandmother based on age and appearance. They lowered their guns as one pulled the communicator. "Boss, it's us, the ones you told to stop the human at the courier's office. I think that it's been a wrong one, boss. It's really old." As the thugs stood around talking on the communicator, the old lady slowly reached into her dress, and before either could stop her, quickly yanked free her stunner, quickly zapping each of them. They jerked and twisted as electricity coursed through their bodies, and the agent smiled. She then pulled away the dress to reveal a black catsuit beneath it, with a utility belt and various weapons strapped about her body, not to mention the secure box on her back. The wrinkles on her face flickering away as she deactivated her costume. But the white hair was still white. "Sorry, boys, my hair's just like this." She pulled the knife free from her thigh, but then looked up as the door to the office burst open. A massive gulk bull lumbering in, carrying a heavy repeater that she thought could only be mounted on a grav tank. "Gotta run, fellas." She sprinted to the side as the gulk took aim, bolts streaming through the air as she sprinted, jumping forward onto her hands and then springing up to crash through the window feet first. Bolts were still streaming around her as she landed with a roll and sprang to her feet. The station's broad streets had screaming civilians running away. The station's broad streets had screaming civilians running every which way as she saw more cartel thugs running her way, gulks and deckish alike. She pulled the pistol free as she ran forward, tapping a device on her belt. For her mission, the agent had been provided with the very best gear that humanity could make, and a few pieces that had to buy from somewhere else. This was one of those Xeno trinkets that she hoped they could replicate soon. The device hummed to life, and suddenly she was in a bubble of modified gravity. It would nullify the pull against her, and she jumped. Against her. Well, it would nullify the pull against her, it would nullify the pull against her when she jumped, and reorient it according to her position when she landed. So, as the cartel took aim, she leapt, sailing high into the air as she spun, feet touching the ceiling as the device reversed the local gravity around her. She sprinted forward along the ceiling as they began firing, trying to readjust their aim. But then she just jumped again, landing on the roof of one of the local structures in the station. Landing on the roof of one of the local structures in this section of the station. All around her, the vents and machinery were peppered with bolts. And then she jumped to the ground at the end of the street, rolling and springing forward, which sent her flying forward, thanks to the device on her belt. Once she was around the corner, she deactivated the gravity reorganizer and quickly checked her implant. It was another 8 miles to the conference center. She had no idea how many cartel thugs were between her and her objective. She needed a way to move faster. A mag train. The mag trains. She quickly routed to the nearest station, half a mile ahead, and sprinted forward. Agent Wakefield's vitals were in the corner of her eye, and she could monitor her blood oxygen levels, the modifications she received making her stronger, faster, and tougher than a normal human. They hadn't gone full cyborg like those bugs they'd waged war. With, but they'd learned how to make more subtle improvements. Her implant informed her a train would soon be arriving, and she set her head down, sprinting as fast as she could, ducking and spinning around the civilians in a way as they yelled at her angrily once she was past. Rounding the corner into the station, she leapt clean over the ticket taker and rolled into the open door of the mag train just as it began to close. The other Xenos on board gave her surprised looks, but she smiled and stood up, holding on to one of the overhead handles as the machine started to move. There was a slight jerk as it left the interior of the station, now racing along the outside in space. She monitored the map on her implant, smiling as she was suddenly a mile closer, then another half mile before the train slowed down for the next station. If her luck held out, she could ride this all the way to the conference center. There was a slight jerk as it entered the atmosphere again and stopped for the next station, doors opening. Civilians got on and off, and she smiled. But then, just before the doors closed, she saw 2 Gulks and 3 Deckish jump into the first car. She cursed and moved down to the last car, hiding around a bulkhead from the door, out of the line of sight down the train. She couldn't use a gun since bullets might break the glass windows and sent them all into space. She heard the gasps of people as the cartel thugs walked along the cars while the train got moving again. Hearing their footsteps get closer, Wakefield pulled that knife up from her thigh once more. A heavy Gulk stepped through the door, looking around, and as he turned to see her, that knife was driven through his eye. The creature didn't even have time to scream as the heavy bulk dropped to the ground. A Deckish stepped forward, gun raised, but Wakefield grabbed his arm and drove her knee into his ribs. She heard a crunch as he grunted out in obvious pain, and she turned, pulling on his arm and tossing him into the wall behind. The next Deckish had a humming energy blade and charged forwards. She quickly parried with her own knife and danced back, careful to keep him in between her and the others. He lashed out with a knife as she ducked and spun, kicking his feet out from under him before driving the knife into his throat as he fell. She then rolled over his body, grabbing his energy blade and throwing it as she got up, watching it sink into the chest of the 3rd Deckish. As he fell, the Gulk behind him just growled, slamming one meaty fist into his palm. The Gulk had to weigh at least 600 pounds. They possessed pointed horns for gouging, a thick leather skin resistant to blades, and had a bone structure as dense as a light armor. and had a bone structure as dense as some light tank armor. Wakefield pulled a pistol free and shot him right through the eye. Wakefield pulled a pistol free and shot him right through one eye. Even point blank, a pistol round couldn't penetrate their skulls, so it just rattled around inside, pulping his brain matter without a risk of her breaking the glass in the train. The bigger they come, the harder they fall. As the body fell to the ground with a heavy thud, she smiled and holstered her pistol. Then she heard the civilians gasping and pointing. She turned to see a Tackham assault craft just outside, speeding alongside the train. Oh, crap. She began to run forward as bolts slammed into the car, the screams of the civilians filling the air, which was quickly sucked out of the holes in the newly shattered windows. She... Oof. Ow. Ow. That water had bones in it. Oh, that monster had bones in it. Which was quickly sucked out of the holes of the newly shattered windows. She pulled a mask up from her belt, slapping it into place as smart fibers quickly expanded around her head, sealing into place. She activated the device on her belt again, diving and ducking as Xeno civilians sailed past her, sucked out into space. Pulling her pistol free again, she shot the side window on the front of the car as she ran towards it, making sure that it was started to break just as she jumped forward, sailing out into space as the shards of glass bumped her. Sailing out into space as the shards of glass bumped off her smart fiber suit. Sailing out into space as the shards of glass bumped off her smart fiber suit. The four-armed Tackham gunner on the side. The four-armed Tackham gunners on the side of the assault craft blinked in surprise as the human was suddenly sailing towards him. But as he tried to pull his hands to grab hers, she turned, touching him feet first. The gravity reorganizer instantly focused all of her momentum and gravity into the points of her feet, crushing the Tackham's chest and sending the body flying through the open door through the assault craft. The interior was open, normally meant to hold a Tackham assault squad, but this craft was only carrying that gunner and a pilot who was looking back at her, quickly trying to pull his wave blaster free. She stepped forward, leaned into it, and she punched him in the face of his pressure suit. She stepped forward, leaning into it, and she punched him in the face of his pressure suit, the glass cracking as he was knocked out. But that just made him slump forward again on the ground. But that made him slump forward against the controls. The assault craft drove forward then, as Wakefield jerked and held on to avoid being tossed out into space. Looking through the viewport, she saw the craft diving towards the station that was shot up. Looking through the viewport, she saw the craft diving towards the station that the shot-up train was slowly pulling into, sparkling and smoking as it arrived. Civilians inside gasping at the sight of the train, but then they cried and pointed up as the craft followed it in, smashing through the glass on top of the station, now decompressing. Smashing through the glass on top of the station, now decompressing the station itself. More Xenos were sucked into space as Wakefield held onto the craft with all her strength, the gravity device almost out of power. It had slammed into the platform, sliding through the ticket terminal, sparks of metal flying as it scraped along the floor of the station. It burst through another wall and out into the street beyond, hitting some sort of food store which must have used a gas to cook as something exploded, fire raining down on the local stores. More civilians were screaming and running as sirens sounded all around the area. Blast doors slowly descending to seal the area. But Wakefield was already out of the crashed craft, sprinting forward as she dove and slid under one of the heavy doors as it fell into place behind her with a solid thud. As she stood up, She glanced at her map. 4 miles to go.
Agent Wakefield, what is your status? We have reports of fighting in the station.
You could say it's an explosive situation, she replied as she pulled the mask off her face. She didn't want to waste her oxygen reserves. Looking around, she saw running civilians, but no cartel thugs just now. She began to run forward once more, looking at her map to try and determine the best course of action. Can't you send in the Marines?
Negative, Agent Wakefield. The cartel is a criminal organization. We're a government. We cannot bring military operations onto foreign territory without permission.
Wakefield sighed and shook her head as she continued to run. Just as she entered another intersection, however, she saw a flash of light in her peripheral vision and quickly ducked and rolled. A high-energy bolt sailed through the area her head had been. She dove behind an automated cleaning droid that was slowly scrubbing the street as more bolts slammed into the area around her. She pressed her back against the droid, moving along next to it. She had no other good cover along the street, but if the droid got closer to the access hatch. Then a bolt slammed into the droid, which whined, coughed, and then died. Growling, she edged along the droid, keeping her head down. As she reached the front, she pulled a small wire from a pocket on her belt, angling it at the corner. Her implant switched over to vision from a tiny cable camera as she examined the area. TACOM sniper team on the roof of the bank in the center of the block. She pulled the cable back, tucked it away. She could hear civilians crying out in surprise and heard people moving. Cartel thugs had to be closing in on her location. Sure enough, she saw Deckish burst out of the shop in front of her, one of the exposed side. Sure enough, she saw a Deckish burst out of the shop in front of her, on the exposed side of the droid that she was taking cover behind. She shot him through the throat with a pistol and fired a few more rounds to keep the others behind him from rushing forward. She quickly pulled a spear from her belt, pushing the button on the cover and tossing it in the air. There was a hiss as grey smoke began to pour out of it, and yet, as the TACOM sniper switched his scope over to heat, his whole field of vision was red. As he kept cycling through vision modes, something was impairing his vision on every one. The Gulks and the Deckish just charged in anyway. As the smoke slowly cleared, the cleaning droid was alone. They looked around, and none noticed as the access hatch on the street slowly clicked back into place. Wakefield moved along quietly as she could. Partially hunched over in the small access space. Scurrying along, she finally found a more open section. Stepping out into the section of crosswalk and pipes, leading to various humming and chugging machines. There were Rulians crewing the station. Thick black goggles covered their 4 eyes. Oil stains their scales. When they saw her, she heard one of them shout, "Hey, that's gotta be a human the cartel is offering a bounty for." They quickly started to run along the catwalks to rush at her. Wakefield sighed and readied herself. The first ran at her, had a large wrench in his hand. He swung it overhead at her, but she quickly turned to avoid the strike, elbowing him in the face and driving her knee into the chest as she pulled him down into it. Then she had to lean back over the railing, watching a blade arc over her face as another slashed at her. Then he tried to stab down, but she rolled to avoid it and grabbed his arm, driving her knee into his stomach, and then tossing him over the edge of the railing. He screamed out as he fell to the floor below. 2 were charging up the metal stairs to get to her, and she jumped, grabbing a pipe to swing her feet forward, kicking the lead one as it drove him back, crying out as he toppled and fell back down the stairs on top of the one behind him. Jumping down and landing on the top of them for good measures, she only had a few more to go. One more ran at her, swinging with a wrench wildly. She rolled past. One more ran at her, swinging with a wrench wildly. She rolled past his... One more ran at her, swinging with a wrench wildly. She rolled past, grabbing his leg and yanking it up to make him fall to the floor of the catwalk, quickly kicking him in the head to keep him down. Then another grabbed her from behind, hugging her arms to her chest as another moved in. But she just stomped on his foot, making him howl in pain as it broke his hold. Then she grabbed his arm, bending over as she tossed him over her shoulder into the one in front of her. Turning, she only had one more to deal with, but was surprised when he leaned forward, knocking his skull into her own. Both her and her attacker gasped out in pain then, each clutching their forehead as they staggered around. "Ah, my head!" He groaned. He groaned out as she grunted and clutched her own skull. "The feck? I don't know," he muttered, and just sort of staggered to crate. He muttered and just sort of staggered to a crate and sat down. She straightened up slowly, wincing as she kept an eye close because her brain told her to. It just felt right. She approached the Rulian, who looked up in time to see her fist as she clocked him in the face, and he slumped off the crate. "Thacker," she muttered, and held her forehead with one hand, and she walked on. The Rulians behind her groaning in pain, or lying unconscious. Then she heard the hum of a lift and saw a Rulian with a bunch of electrical gear step off the platform in front of her, along the wall of the station. He looked around at all the groaning, injured workers and then at her. Slowly, he stepped aside and motioned at the lift. Feel free to use it, hopefully without beating me up." She stepped up into the metal platform and pressed the lever to get it humming forward back up. She stepped up onto the metal platform and pressed the lever to get it humming forward back the way the electrician had come from. She shook her head a little and blinked as she finally got her full senses back after the headbutt. The lift hummed along the maintenance corridor under the main streets of the station until she came to a junction at the end of a ladder going up, and catwalks. Until she came to a junction at the end with a ladder going up, and catwalks heading either way. Her implant told her that she had 1.5 miles to go. She was about to head up onto the street level when the station contacted her again. "Wakefield, we found the cartel's command post." The indicator flashed on her map and she smiled. Putting her mask free, she sealed it into place, and instead of heading up onto the street, walked through to the other. Putting her mask free, she sealed it into place, and instead of heading up onto the street, walked to the other side, approaching an airlock. She pulled her maintenance pressure suit free, putting it on, and grabbing some gear. Nothing but an ordinary maintenance worker to see here as she opened the airlock and stepped out on the outside of the station. "Where the hell is that human?" The cartel boss was literally slimy Yervy and screamed out with the thugs in front of him from behind his desk. He had an aquarium of rare and exotic fish on the wall behind them, many endangered and illegal to own. The pelts and heads of various endangered animals decorating the floor and walls of his office. There were a number of Dekish, Gulk and Taken in front of him, getting chewed out from being unable to stop a single human. He was in the middle of yelling at them when they heard something tap on the glass window to the side. Everyone looked and saw a pressure suit of a maintenance worker wave at them. A few Dekish waved back, unsure what was going on. Then the figure slapped a plastic brick on the window and jumped back. "Oh shit," was the last thing the cartel boss said before the brick exploded, sucking them all out into space. The fish in the aquarium just swam on, unaware of what just happened. After a nice little spacewalk, Wakefield finally stepped back into the station proper, right next to the Trade Conference Center. She pulled the bulkier suit off, back in her form-fitting black catsuit. She walked up the stairs and out into the main street, leading into the important center. She walked up the stairs and out into the main street. She walked up the stairs and out onto the main street, leading into an important center, finding a large number of Skulkian guards. The Skulkians were one of the triumvirates, a species of multi-limbed scorpion-like insectoids. They were incredibly hardy and durable in contact. Especially hand-to-hand. "Halt, human! There has been fighting in the station. We need to see your ID before you can enter." "That's fine." She smiled and reached for a pocket to grab her ID. It was empty. She frowned and began to pat herself down as she suddenly realized her ID was sitting in that secure courier room back where she'd started. Hold on a second." She turned away from them and tapped her comm. "Station, I'm outside. I forgot my ID." There was a sigh over the line. "I'll be right there." She turned back and smiled at the guards. Then, as she waited, she swung her arms back and forth, lightly clamping them together while she whistled. Finally, the human diplomat stepped up behind the guards, speaking to them as she was let past. Speaking to them as she was let by. She smiled and pulled a secure box from her back, walking into the trade conference, ready to show the triumvirate something no other species had ever thought of. About an hour later, they were standing in front of a panel of triumvirate ambassadors. The Skulkians were the muscle, strong and solid. The Phoenix were the engineers, inquisitive and intelligent, while the noble Norvians in the center were the diplomats, since they were so charismatic and cunning. The human diplomat and Agent Wakefield stood before them and inspected what the human delegation had set before them. "This is what you bring us. We've seen inventions and materials and more, and you simply bring us food," the tall, graceful Norvian said, and as he inspected the plate in front of him. "This is the best you have to offer." "It is a family." It's a family recipe. My family has handed down generation to generation," Agent Wakefield said with a smile. "They're called chocolate chip cookies. Try them." The delegates picked up the small, hot discs. In front of them and gingerly bit a piece off. They all started to nod and hum happily as they tasted it, quickly finishing the first they had picked up. "Our large shipment of materials to make you these was sabotage, so we had to make a much smaller batch. You each have 3 and a small box to share. If you give us some more time, we can make you more," the diplomat was saying. Oh, wrong person. "Our large shipment of materials to make you more of these was sabotaged, so we had to make a much smaller batch. You each have 3 and a small box to share. If you give us more time, we can make you more," the diplomat was saying. The delegates ate the cookies quickly, never having had anything like it before. You see, we know other species might have better tech than us, and anything can be reverse engineered or copied with time. Resources can be acquired through trade or conquest. But so far, we haven't found any species with the concept of desserts," the diplomat said with a smile. Suddenly, the Skulkian pulled the top of the box off the box of extra cookies that he had been provided. The other delegates watched as he shoved them into his mouth, chomping down on them as he shuddered in pleasure. Then he grabbed the boxes from in front of the other 2 delegates, tucking them under his limbs as he secured, tucking them under the back limbs as he scurried around the table and charged Agent Wakefield. She gasped in surprise as she was lifted up above his head in a multitude of limbs. "Oh, the cookie-making human is mine." He started running towards the exit. "Prepare my ship! We go to Earth! More cookies! More!" "Put me down!" the agent was crying out as she was carried off. The human diplomat and the other 2 triumvirate delegates shared awkward glances for a moment. Finally, the Norvian coughed and spoke up. Apologies, we'll, award you the trade contract. So, you said this is something it's called dessert?" So you said this is something called dessert. The diplomat smiled.
Why, yes. Let me explain to you more about the best humanity has to offer.
End of story. Okay.
Story done.
No, work. Good afternoon, Arcanage. I hope you're doing well today. I'm doing well as can be. Yes. No, that stitch is still making my life a bit difficult. Very distracting, reading with a painful stitch.
But such are the sacrifices we need to make for art.
But I think that is all the narrations done for the day. That is... yeah. 2 stories. 2 20-minute stories. It's not bad. Lose that. Go to fool that. So all we need to do is generate some backgrounds. And then make some thumbnails. No, not ringing any bells, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Some stories I just forget, unfortunately. But it's not really ringing any bells. The only one I can think of the feline species is when Death Wielders meet. Maybe? Oh, and then there's Necomarines. There's been a couple, now that I'm thinking about it.
Okay, backgrounds generated. Now we do some thumbnails.
Actually, there was the one with the human, it was a diplomat, and they took him to a field with catnip. And they got obsessed with it. That was an old story, I think. Hello? Why isn't this doing what I wanted to do? Welcome back, Captain. Awesome, sir. I'm glad I'm helping. Now I'm curious. Why isn't this working? There we go. Yeah, that'll work. Yeah, Ultima's still going. It's never stopped. And probably never will. Which is fair enough. It knows what it is. Ultima is definitely immortal.
Alrighty, that is 2 done.
My voice is a bit unhappy with me. So I'm pretty much going to call it for the day. I don't think I can talk for another hour. 45 minutes without putting too much strain on the old voice. But thank you all for sticking with me, through this live stream. I hope that I've entertained you, at least a little bit. But thank you for giving me your time, nonetheless. I will see you all tomorrow. And tomorrow there was probably going to be 2 videos on the main channel. One Re-Tifos and one normal video. So exciting stuff. We're stepping it up again. I'll see you all tomorrow. And away. Thank you all. Goodbye.